You asked us an episode before around what makes us unique. Part of what makes us unique is trying to be intentional around all the levers that are necessary to pull in order to create sustainable impact.
Welcome to the IAAQLI 6 Pillars in Action podcast, where we deep dive into the transformative impact of the work being done in Indianapolis Black communities. Get ready to be inspired by the incredible projects and organizations making a real difference in the lives of Indianapolis residents. And that conversation starts right now.
Welcome to 6 Pillars in Action podcast, where we're taking an in-depth look at the work of the Indianapolis African American Quality of Life Initiative, or the IAAQLI. Last episode, we really got a good overview of how we got here and how you guys came up with the pillars. But today we are back with Willis and Carlin to talk more specifically about the work that's happening. I'm your host, Samantha Douglas, and I guess we'll start with going back over those 6 pillars and just giving us a kind of a breakdown of each one as well.
Yeah, so just a little bit background. When we did the issues prioritization process, we asked that every facilitator would put together a report of all of the recommendations that their group came up with. And one of the things that we asked them to also do in their report was really articulate what they believe the purpose of that pillar is, and then the outcomes and the goals that they anticipate achieving if we were to address these priorities. And so our team internally spent the same time while those processes were being handled, really articulating what are our goals and what are our strategies and objectives for the overall initiative. And we created definitions for each of the pillars. And so I won't say them in specific form. You can go to our website to learn more about it. But generally speaking, education, again, employment, housing, business and entrepreneurship, leadership, civic engagement, and health and wellness. Those are our 6 categories. And I'll talk about generally a few of them for the conversation today, and I'll invite Willis to share more thoughts. So we first really started talking about education as a journey. So that pillar really they imagined it as a train ride. What type of education does every young person deserve, especially Black kids, right? Not only Black kids, but especially Black kids, considering Marion County, considering the current backdrop educationally for our young people and the achievement gap of our young people. And they really thought about from 0 until about 13, year 13, which is technically the year after your 12th grade year. What should every student have? And a lot of the things they talked about was access to high quality education, access to culturally responsive education, access to materials that are up to date and relevant, access to history about themselves, in addition to being reading proficiency by 3rd grade, right? As well as the fact that they should have math proficiency by 6th grade, and then access to college if they so choose, right? 21st century scholarships, FAFSA completion. And then if they wanted to go in the path of employment, that they were ready for employment. So partnerships between K-12 and businesses to build the next cadre of educated students who can go and do training around trades. And so that was education. And then we also wanted to define home ownership. And generally speaking, our goal has always been, let's get affordable, safe housing units made available for Black residents. That has been the focus. We recognize that there's a housing shortage. We also recognize that for those who are able to get into housing, those houses are not always affordable, needless to say, even safe. And then lastly, we also recognize that there's a significant reality that Black people are segregated in our city. And so those 3 issues are foremost really interesting to us as an initiative. And then the last topic that I will share a little bit about is employment. And so our goal was primarily to increase high-wage jobs to allow individuals to have a high quality of life. And there was a report that was done by Brookings Institute that articulated that every individual without children needs to make at least $18 per hour. Now we can look at
without children.
Just and we can
without children.
Yes. And we know people are not paying at that rate.
Right.
And so that gave us a baseline under which to really challenge the field of employment to not only create jobs, but create high wage jobs, particularly in CTE programs or in technology-based programs. That's been our focus. But generally speaking, it's about job promotion, high-wage jobs, high-quality jobs, so that individuals who are Black in this city can have a high high quality of life.
Yeah. So can you touch on, Willis, the education piece? Like, why is that important to the quality of life of our people?
I'll be very basic. If you can't read, compute, and if you are not literate in terms of technology, it will be very difficult to move forward in this society.
Yeah.
And our feeling is that learning and skill development has to begin, quite frankly, at birth, but best in early learning programs. So foundational to our education effort, and grants are around funding efforts to strengthen early childhood education, as well as then trying to influence the quality of teachers, retaining and training teachers, and then looking at curriculum. What kinds of things, especially to help young people learn about themselves through their history. All of those things have been addressed in some of the grants that we have made.
That's amazing. I know for schools all over the country, we have a shortage of especially Black male teachers, like in our schools. And so was there a special emphasis on that at all? Or is there anybody that you funded that has an emphasis on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the percentage used to be 2%. Black males. Now it's 1.6, 1.7% after COVID. Since COVID has exacerbated the issue.
Yeah.
And so definitely in our first few rounds, we've addressed organizations that are working on recruitment and retention, but not just of leaders, or teachers, I should say, but also of leaders. We know that K-12 education has a dearth of leaders in spaces like principalship and assistant principalship, superintendency, et cetera, and central office, generally speaking. So we wanted to invest in nonprofit organizations who were addressing that directly. And when we say nonprofit, it's important to note that nonprofits are also schools, right? So if a school wanted to and had a plan of action to create a mechanism by which undertrained individuals wanted to enter into the path of teaching, they had access to, and we were able to fund a project to do that. And we continue to be interested in doing things like that.
So what I just heard is they want schools to apply.
Absolutely.
That's what I heard. Okay.
Absolutely. And I will say we've had schools apply. And I won't talk about something that we're working on, but our goal, again, is to ensure that the schools that are addressing Marion County kids have access to address that in deep ways through our funding mechanism that hopefully will be sustainable long term.
Yeah, we had a school corporation that invested in taking some of its educational aides and people who were not certified teachers, putting them in a program, helping provide supports for them to get a degree and to get a certification so that they could move forward as educators in that particular school corporation. One of the things that we realize is that school corporations may have to grow their own folks. And a place to grow folks are those people who are teacher aides or that have been their community partners in community-based organizations serving youth, but who may also have an interest in education, sliding some of them into the training and certification programs that will help them eventually be teachers.
So I was a cadet teacher when I was in school. So when I was in high school, so to your point, like, yes, we have to grow our own. We're going to have to, and get to them younger too, really get them into loving learning and wanting to be in classrooms. So beyond education, what about employment? Because I feel like that's a good, like, connecting piece, because ultimately education is preparing us for employment, a way to really take care of ourselves beyond school. So what kind of employment opportunities were you guys able to fund through this?
I will let Willis talk about the employment projects in particular, generally speaking, but I want to say something about ecosystems. So Willis and I, Tony and the team have talked at length about the importance of ecosystems across each of our pillars. And so when we think about ecosystems, we're not just thinking about those who are employed, we're also thinking about the systems that do employment. And we're wanting to partner with existing organizations that already work on these issues, but we're also working on collaborating across systems so that we can ultimately ensure that there's sustainable, collaborative, across the aisle investment, both in funding but also in programming. And so I wanted to say that so that as we think about all of our pillars, we understand we're trying to address the ecosystem, okay? And so I'll give it to Willis to talk about projects.
I'll talk a little bit about employment that we have supported, and I want you to also see how it connects to an issue area. We have supported a program that teaches young folks how to be involved in the construction trades, how to build houses, how to do the wiring, how to do the plumbing. That is very consistent with the desire to support the creation of multifamily and individual homes for families. So we, on one side of the pool, invested in projects that were building housing, and in another part of the pool, i.e. another pillar, employment to train the people in those particular industries. We've also trained people to work as mechanics, people to get certified as drone operators. And so that's just some of the things that we have done in the particular employment area. But as Carlin said earlier, we want to do employment things that are going to allow people to get livable wages. It's one thing to develop a skill, but it ought to be a skill in an industry that is either currently hiring or growing in what it will offer as opportunities, as opposed to things that artificial intelligence or whatever may soon take over, and it would be vanishing. So we're trying to stay attuned to those groups and making sure they're connected to the industries that are potential growth industries.
Yeah, I love the intentionality. I know we have 4 more pillars to get back to. We will be back in just a second to get to those and really talk about the work happening in those.
Coming up next on the 6 Pillars in Action podcast, we'll continue our conversation with IAAQLI leaders. And don't forget to subscribe to our podcast and visit the IAAQLI website to learn more about the incredible work being done and how you can get involved.
Welcome back to 6 Pillars in Action podcast. We were having a conversation about the 6 pillars, and we will check back in because we had 4 more to cover. I can't believe that we still have so many. Yeah, but I mean, that's a credit to you all because that's the amazing work that's being able to get done with all of this. So we left off talking about education and employment and that connection, especially the intentionality where one is almost feeding the other, right? So talk about how that then impacts housing and home ownership, the next pillar.
Well, I'll start. It's important to note again that our goal is to increase housing access to affordable, quality, safe homes. And we talked about ecosystem previously. And with housing, you could easily say, well, you just want to build more homes and make them affordable, make them quality, make them safe. But we also want to influence the developers, right? So you can imagine that funding goes to purchase of land acquisition is what they call it. I'm learning so much about these things now. And then you also have to now build on that land and then get all of the state or local certifications to do so. But generally speaking, we know that Black developers are also underfunded in these conversations. Yep. They have limited access to funds, and when they have access to funds, they don't have enough gap funding to address to get to the end of the project. So then what it looks like is our Black developers are underskilled, but it's actually that they're underfunded, right? And so the ecosystem requires us to address access to homes for residents, but also to address funding mechanisms for developers.
One of the projects that we funded was to, in fact, support Black developers because they need equipment, they need certain certifications in order to be able to be competitive to do the housing and other projects. One of the organizations that is a housing development organization, they partnered with a Black developer because they had the land, this organization did, and they have years of experience in financing and otherwise engagement in housing. But what they did was identified a Black developer and partnered with them to bring their expertise with their technical expertise of building to create a project.
Yeah, because I feel like one of the holes with affordable housing is people don't acknowledge the fact that these developers have to make money. They have to be able to make money. So with affordable housing, it comes so many other things like you were talking about that really, incentivizes builders to build houses that are affordable.
Yeah. Which leads us into business and entrepreneurship, because many developers started out as entrepreneurs doing homeowner repair, which was an area that we funded. But then there are business folks that are involved in everything from commercial businesses, whether it be restaurants, whether it be other types of consumer-oriented businesses, clothing, etc. But one of the things that we have supported are organizations who have, in fact, tried to provide the technical skills for doing a business, everything from bookkeeping, everything from putting a business plan together, how you deal with your taxes, how you get certified to be a government contractor or a corporate contractor. Yeah. So we have been supporting programs to do that. And we gave some of them dollars to create loan grant pools. It's one thing to give people advice, but they also need capital, because African American businesses have been traditionally undercapitalized and have not been able to get loans from banks and other financial institutions. Our hope, again, is if we can help equip businesses with the technical skills, also with the capital, that long term for sustainability, they will be able to use the existing community's ongoing funding mechanisms for business, whether it's a bank or venture capitalist or a governmental program, et cetera.
I think it's important to note, because I think a listener would be like, well, so businesses can get money. Yes, if you connect with the nonprofit. Okay, because our funding goes through nonprofit 501c3 organizations. So it's important to know. And the other thing that I want to say about business is we've learned part of our platform and the benefit of being funded at this level is that folks like to talk to us, tell us things, or they'll actually take a meeting. Right. And we've learned even from the Indiana Economic Development Corporation that 95% of the state is small business oriented. All right. 95% of the state. And so what percentage of that is Black and brown individuals, and what percentage of those individual organizations have revenue above $1 million who can actually sustain themselves? So learning all of this allows us to be thoughtful around where our investments live, and then also the conversations we need to have across collaborative groups to ensure that those funding mechanisms continue and the support around those organizations towards sustainability continues.
And that leads us to leadership and civic engagement.
I was going to say, before we get there, I love the idea too, though, that each one of these are flowing into each other, but also that you guys are so intentional about building around, and it's more than funding.
Oh, yeah.
Right? It's more than funding, but it's really about building community and support into the funding so that as people are building, they're able to sustain, like you were talking about.
And I think that's so important. You asked us an episode before around what makes us unique. Part of what makes us unique is trying to be intentional around all the levers that are necessary to pull in order to create sustainable impact. And funding is just one lever, right? Yeah. If you don't provide organizations with consultancy, if you don't engage organizations who are interested in applying to your funding and giving them space to bring a proposal to a conversation, give them immediate feedback on that proposal, and then allow them to go back and fix based on feedback, then you're not preparing their capacity to apply for funding. In addition to that, we provided convenings where any organization that was connected to our website can come and learn about how to get the dollars that we're offering. Essentially the strategies, when the RFP would be released, but then also learning from consultants around best practices of application design, researching issues that you might want to receive funding for, logic model development, all of which you can go on our website and learn more about. And that material and those recordings still exist on the website. So we're trying to give people the process, but people also have to connect to resources to help them move through the process effectively.
We're very aware that this was a 5-year initiative, and it will go out of existence. So during the process, if all we did was to give money to a few projects, as opposed to try to change the ecosystem in which the projects operated to the fullest extent that it can, then we really are not creating potential foundation for long-term sustained change and giving. And that's a reason that supporting groups that are involved in advocacy as it relates to housing, a group that is in trying to ensure that people develop the skills to know how to run for public office, or how to influence policymakers. Those are the things that are into leadership vein that we think are important to help further create an atmosphere and a policy domain that guides public funding and even foundation and individual funding to support things. So if you don't create opportunities to change the environment in which people operate, it's very difficult.
And for our community, so often civic engagement feels like a luxury that we just don't have, right? We feel like we're so pressed about like surviving, you know, that we oftentimes don't think about that. No, we can run for office and we can, you know, make sure we're getting out to vote and registering our neighbors, making sure our neighbors vote, knowing our neighbors, right? So yeah, like it's just so needed. We need to bring back that sense of community, and part of community is collective responsibility, right? And I think that's really what the basis of like civic leadership is. So the final one is health and wellness. Quickly, we're gonna go over like what's been happening in the health and wellness space.
Yeah, generally speaking, because I'm sort of nerdy in the sense that I would love to give you data. I won't right now. Read the website. But what I will say is our goal has been to improve the quality of life under health for Black individuals and supporting organizations who could do that on our behalf. So part of what we wanted to do, we know that there's a limited percentage of Black individuals who are entering into the mental health space. We wanted to create a pipeline for that, and we funded projects to do that. But we've also wanted to address direct issues that are facing Black people. And so when we think about health outcomes and disparities therein, we've been funding projects to address specific disparities in health outcomes, from, you know, think about comorbidity rates, maternal health rates. We've been addressing projects that support that. And there's a myriad of different projects that we've been addressing, but ultimately it's around mental health, health education, prevention and intervention, and supporting access to resources that allow folks to get the help that they need early on, early intervention, and not waiting until you're at the third level of intervention where you ultimately beyond to chronic.
Yeah. I know especially maternal health is a huge one. Like, can you talk about really quick, like a quick project that you guys funded around
Sure.
that?
We funded a doula project.
Yes.
A project that will help mothers, and especially young mothers, feel comfortable caring for their children, but caring for themselves after they do birth a child.
Yeah.
And so for me, I'd never heard the term doula.
Yeah. And having an advocate in the room, that's the other thing. A doula helps keep you on track as you're birthing, because, you know, you're not focused on your birth plan when you're like, I'm just, get this thing out of me, right? And so the moms having another advocate in the room is so important, because there's oftentimes things are going on that we're not even noticing. And to have somebody who's focused on that, who has their eyes and ears on that, is so helpful.
We're excited about that project, as well as another project that we funded that's exclusive focus on women's health and women's health issues.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us on both episodes. Honestly, I didn't know any of this by the way, before we did this.
You know.
I know this is so, I think this is so helpful. This is so helpful, insightful also. But when we come back, we are going to be back with Tony Mason to talk more about everything else, right? All the rest of the questions we didn't get to about the process and then how it's actually being implemented.
Coming up next on the Six Pillars in Action podcast, we'll continue our conversation with IAAQLI leaders. And don't forget to subscribe to our podcast and visit the IAAQLI website to learn more about the incredible work being done and how you can get involved.
Welcome back to Six Pillars in Action podcast. We have been hearing about the pillars, the 6 pillars, all of the work that's happening within them. But now we get to shift a little bit and talk about more of how this process is being implemented. But before we get there, you guys have an interesting dynamic in the 3 of you that have been on the podcast in these first 2 episodes with the generational differences. Because, you know, historically we've talked about how we don't work well together, or it's hard for us to bridge that gap between the generations. So talk to us about how you guys have been making this work.
Well, let me just say this first and foremost. Over the course of my work career, my professional career here in Indianapolis, you know, I've had the opportunity to watch Mr. Bright do his thing at Lilly Endowment and be, you know, a fixture, a civic leader, a servant leader in the community. And so in a lot of ways, he's been a role model for me and so many other leaders in the community. And, you know, so how could you not respect the knowledge, experience, and expertise that he would bring to bear on a process like this? And then, you know, I was very fortunate early in my career here in Indianapolis to have people like the late Reverend Charles Williams, the Bill Mazes, and others who allowed me to have an opportunity to have a seat at the table and to learn and grow from them. And so to be open to, you know, Dr. Tishner being at the table and in fact watching him provide leadership and bring all sorts of tools and resources to bear to help us to operate and to operationalize this initiative has just been amazing. And that's something that we have to do more of across the community, frankly, is making sure that we make room for everyone at the table.
Yeah.
I've always had respect for my younger colleagues who are experienced, who are smart, and who are committed. And as I have watched Tony in his multiple careers, I've seen a few things. Him be able to change from the not-for-profit sector in an organization to leading a citywide and, quite frankly, a national effort, and then come and lead a historic organization from an organization that really had been prominent but needed new life. And I saw him be able to do that. And seeing that has always meant that I've had a great deal of appreciation and respect, you know, for him. Plus, we've always been able to talk candidly with one another. And when Dr. Tishner came, I'll give you a little story that illustrates that generational difference. We were going to meet one time, and I came with about 5 or 6 folders with paper in it and all that kind of stuff. He came with a little laptop, and we met, and we were getting ideas shared and all that. And I said, well, since you're doing that, would you please send me the notes? He said, I already have.
Useful. Yeah, super useful. The different dynamics and perspectives. I'm a paper girl too, though, even though I'm younger, because I like the paper. But I love that you guys have such a mutual respect that regardless, 'cause I'm sure you can't get along all the time. You can't agree about everything.
No, of course, that would never be possible. But I think the other important thing I want to point out is, you know, that these are my brothers. We really care about each other, And Danica, Alicia, they're our sisters, and we really are operating as a family too when we do this work, because we really do care about each other. And I think that becomes an important part of it. So there's the respect that comes with doing the work together, but then there's also that genuine care for each other, because we've all been through something, whether it's health, family, a crisis, and we've been there to lift each other up, support each other. There have been times when they have carried the load, or vice versa. We've all led and we've all followed at different times.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. And I appreciate that work, because I feel like so many of us need that. Those of us that are younger in the city, we need people who are willing to come in and show us respect back, right? For our, limited experience, but still, like you said, just bringing fresh ideas and new ways of doing things that's really valuable to the process. So we'll get into your organization has awarded $60 million to 130 organizations. I mean, to hear that, how does that, what do you think of when you hear that?
Occasionally, wow.
Yeah.
And then it's like our intent is to make a difference. And we want to get deeper into understanding the work that these groups have done to understand the level of difference. 60 million in a exchange of billions, when you add all of the governmental, all the private individual, and all that, is in some ways pretty minuscule.
Yeah.
But the intentionality of the focus,
yes,
the ability to be exclusive relative to our intent to influence the lives of African American individuals, institutions, etc. We're hoping that we will be able, when we get to the evaluation of this, to hear stories and to even see data that suggests concrete, discernible, if nothing else, incremental shifts that have been made.
Because it's still, even though, it could relative, right? It can be labeled as small or minuscule. However, the way that it's targeted specifically to the Black community is significant, right? Especially when we look at the percentage of population that we actually make up. That's a lot of dollars going into very specific areas and with a specific people, which is just powerful. How about you? What do you think about when you think about everything you guys have accomplished?
I just think it's so empowering.
Yes.
And I don't use that word loosely, because it's very rare that organizations or groups of organizations are given dollars of this significance, transformational dollars, to do this kind of work. And knowing that if in the end, this is catalytic work that leads to even greater things that would happen, not only through the Indianapolis Urban League, but those 130 grantees who are doing work that will fundamentally impact the community and impact African Americans in this city and in this county, is just so crucial in this moment in time, particularly when there's so many people that are struggling and have reason, unfortunately, to maybe in some instances give up hope.
Yeah.
But it also is showing us too that we can work together, and that we can go to the community and ask people to lean in and give their thoughts and their input about what needs to be done to improve their quality of living. And so there's the grantees, there's the community partners, there's all of the individuals that have leaned into this process. And so it's rewarding to see that happen. And hopefully, if nothing else, it's just the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to say next steps, because everybody is pressed wanting to know, when is this next round? Is it really the final round? What are you expecting next? What's happening next?
It is the final round. It will be sometime in 2025. The topics will touch on the 6 pillars that we have spoken. There will be some topics that will be dealt with because we've had time to have conversations, in-depth conversations with institutions and individuals that may be things that we say, let's submit a proposal to address that. So maybe invitational. Then there will be some that, as in the past, an RFP will be out there and groups can submit requests. There will be some topics that may have overlap. And when I say overlap, as we talked on a previous show, we're involved with housing construction, but we're also involved with housing employees, teaching people the skills. There may be some other things that come up that the pillar content may seem to blend in terms of what we're wanting to do. Because isolated, there's just some things you can't get done. It has to be more holistic.
Yeah, and I can't believe we are out of time. But final thoughts before we close out the podcast. What does the community need to know? Any closing remarks?
Sure, absolutely. The community simply needs to know that, again, this has really been about empowering us to work together to address issues and challenges facing African Americans in this community. We've got 130 grantees out here doing amazing work, and we're going to start to see the fruits of that labor happen. We're going to be telling these stories throughout this year, and we hope that people are paying attention, because anytime you have an undertaking of this magnitude, there will be naysayers.
Yeah.
But we also know that there's incredible work happening here, and it is making a difference. And you know, we're just thankful that we've got this amazing team here doing this work locally. We've got an incredible partner in the National Urban League and the work and the support that they're providing. President Moriel, Executive Vice President Dennis Surratt, Vice President Leslie Andrews. And so it shows that this could, in some way, shape, or form, be a model for what could continue to happen here in this community, but also across the country.
Yeah.
And so we're just proud to be able to do this work.
Yeah. I would just add very quickly that we want to thank the community for its support, its encouragement, its willing to trust us, its willingness to try some new things, and for its commitment to support the organizations in the future that we have tried to help along. Without ongoing support for volunteers, talent, and resources, many of the groups that we have supported will not be able to continue to do the work that we've helped fund.
Right, right. Thank you all so much for your time, for explaining everything. I learned so much. I know so many other people have too. And moving forward, we have so many more episodes dedicated to learning more about this work, which I'm excited about. To make sure that you stay in touch with us, you can receive the newsletter. You can receive the newsletter. You can follow us on social media. At Facebook, it is IAAQLI Initiative. On Instagram, it is IAAQLI_. And on YouTube, it is IAAQLI. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, especially share, right? We want to make sure that community members are knowing that this work is happening and how they can get connected if they need these services, right? So thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.
We hope you enjoyed today's 6 Pillars in Action podcast and learned more about how the IAAQLI funding is impacting our city. And remember, to stay up to date on what's happening with IAAQLI and the 6 Pillars in Action, subscribe to the podcast in Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Play. You can also check out the 6 Pillars in Action newsletter, blogs, and other videos on our website at IAAQLI.org. Until next time, let's continue to celebrate the power of transformation. See you next time.